We're going to talk about Neotropica versus Tropical Nouveau.
Let's get started so that those definitions could be a little bit more refined for those people who've not heard those words before. And just a little bit of history of where we came with the guide and just, again, part of that growing together and everybody chipping in to put this whole wonderful product line that comes from Hawaii. So let's just roll the tape and let's just watch. Aloha, everyone. Welcome to Wedding Celebration 2021. I hope everyone's enjoying the edition of the Breeders and Growers Forum to get you all connected with the awesome people behind the gorgeous flowers and foliages that we are so lucky to design with. That's the members of the Hawaii Floriculture and Nursery Association. To begin the design portion of this virtual webinar, I would like to share a little insight and history into designing with Hawaiian tropicals. To share how we got here today. The 80s and 90s were truly the heyday of tropical design. I can remember so many incredible showy hotel lobby designs all around the country, prominently featuring tropical flowers throughout North America. High-style exotic designs were all the rage in contemporary decor and special events. The sheer size of cut tropicals made them the ideal choice for big installations. The popularity for this class of botanicals slowly diminished with the rise and popularity of Martha Stewart, which focused primarily on the softer garden flowers for home decor and weddings. Roses followed by hydrangeas became the main ingredients, while ranunculus quickly became the next it flower. Their quality are about as opposite to tropicals as it can possibly be. This has led us to today, where Hawaiian tropical growers have reinvented themselves in their marketing to popularize the use of tropicals all over again. So walking through the history of tropical design and specifically Hawaiian tropical floral design, this is a very good example of what that is, and it's a classic. It's used still today all over wherever the tropical design is required because it really typically gives us a real good vision of what Hawaii feels like. But the key thing that's really important that you notice is its size. For the number of stem count that's in this design, if you equate it to number of stem counts in ordinary design on the mainland with temperate flowers, you will get less than half the size because the flowers are not as big, the stem length is not as much. So typically, the size is really one of its biggest assets. And typically, in the older or classic traditional style, it was determined the way it's shaped and way it kind of became the final design was dependent on the length of the stems that you received. And so you always got the gingers up high. You have the heliconia as one of the central piece in the middle because it's the thickest stem, it's the heaviest, so you can't have it leaning over because that would create a balance problem. So it kind of dictated where it needed to go. Hala, these ones here, the pandanus, are usually very long, and it gave you a nice radiating point to one side, balanced out over on this side with a Rica palm. And so you design instinctively by the size and the length of the material. The bromeliad, the guzmania stems are shorter, so they're going to sit deeper towards the bottom. As well, the anthurium, sort of because of the length of the anthurium, they're going to flow out and float through the design to give you that real Hawaiian look. And in this, I use Oncidium orchid, which typically before would have been more dendrobium, but now with today's Hawaiian offering, the Oncidium orchids are some of the softest, most prettiest, and most delicate, which is such a necessity today because to contrast the harshness, to get people who are designing temperate flowers on a regular basis, a softer side, this is a necessary part that have to be in the mix to help counterbalance from the harshness and the hardness of some of the tropicals. So this is a key ingredient because it helps balance out the texture. As well, the pincushion protea, that real softness and that intriguing radial, beautiful pins, as well as the lycopodium, which is a much softer green to contrast to the smoothness and the exoticness of the monstera foliages. So it's really about balancing it out to the size, to the color, the texture. And so that's what happens
with the classic Hawaiian tropical design, and we wanted to start this story right here first. So what was called the high style design was really very popular in the 80s and 90s. And the difference between high style and a little bit more traditional classic tropical design was that it was not as broad and it wasn't as heavy at the bottom. It was a little bit sleeker and really quite vertical in form. And so in this one, to get the verticality, you know, we bring up the ginger, we bring up the heliconia, all the things that comes in the box when it's shipped to me up high, and then bring it down with the different materials that are shorter and shorter in stem. So it's a similar kind of formula, but concentrating on the tightness at the binding point area, which meant that there's a lot of detailing at the base to cover the mechanics of foam and to do it in a very tight way so that it doesn't spread out and become a very bottom heavy design. So there's a little bit more contriving of a lot of the materials that made it a little bit more creative and interesting in that period of time. There was a lot of intrigue and interest in a lot of the techniques that used that. So we have the trimming of the areca palm. Instead of having it like a frond, we trim it up so it's a much more sleeker, taller, thinner, kind of a statuesque look. In combination with hala, instead of it just going straight up and sort of almost like a fountain shape, we switch it back and bend it so that it's got a sharp angle. Because in those days too, we used to keep a lot of these stub ends so that just kind of give it the sort of similar feeling to create those bends, to make it really much more angular to go with the feel of the material itself, like heliconia. And so there's that. And then there's also the trimming, actually taking away the size of the hala so that it's a little bit more yellow, so that you get a little bit more connection to the yellow of the oncidium and the flow of the oncidium. So you can see that at the top. And a lot of just wrapping and covering the foam with the use of tropical foliages, which was one of the best thing about what tropicals provided us. It gave us really good coverage. So as I bent these hala like really sharply and committed to that, then when I did this kind of a loop with the kukuligo, which is the whaleback, I want to commit to that bending because I did it here so that I didn't want it to be just lukewarm. So I want to actually bend it so that I commit to that feeling, so that the angularity that I created to work into this design is repeated. So that way you get the kind of the curves of some of the material, and then angularity to go with the sharpness of material such as heliconia. So it's all about putting it all together, and so tropicals were really popular for that kind of purpose. Now, the florists in general, we're moving on to designing more in glass about at the beginning of 2000 and all through that decade, and more garden flowers. So this became a little bit sort of an older kind of a look, and that it was not as desirable except for in instances of matching up with really modern decor. Next, I want to talk a little bit about the selection of what's available from Hawaiian tropical growers and how it was not always known to the majority of florists in years past. It was only after seeing the range of color palette that's available in anthuriums alone when I visited the islands and the growers in the mid-2000s and seeing such a much wider range of botanicals that were not known to florist world, that it was determined that creation of this, the Neotropica Hawaii Tropical Flower Guide, would serve as much needed and necessary marketing tool for the Hawaiian tropical flower growers group. Neotropica indicates New Age tropicals, a mission to reinvent tropical popularity by rolling out the entire spectrum of Hawaiian tropical selection. The first edition was published in 2009. It showed vast selection, expanded color. I mean, you can see even on the front covers, most people didn't even know that these colors are available in tropicals. And of course, the richness, this is what people are familiar with. So we divided into 3 color palettes so that there's the tropical sunrise, and I want to share this with you because I think this was one of the stunning things that we did that really clarify the wonderful selection. So there's the tropical sunrise, and we call it that because that's the vividness of the brightest colors that's available in the light of the morning. And so you got the hot colors, from hot pinks to oranges to yellows, and then the bright lime green. That was all the rage anyway during the 2000s. Like, a lot of hot colors are really, really popular, and we wanted to make sure that we had introduced that this was available through tropicals. And then we went to the tropical pastels and the tropical whites. So that would be like a midday sun when it's so bright that it bleaches out everything that we see. So it's all the pastels. Everything seemed very light. So that and the whites became sort of tropical midday. And then, of course, the tropical sunset. So dividing it by the light of the day, we were able to define the color selection of what's available through the tropicals, and the richness of even the tropical sunset. From this is what we knew, but then it went into even deeper and moodier, darker color, and into the purples and the plums, which was not also known to most of the floral industry. So this was really exciting to roll that out to show that there are these selections. And then we divided the book into the different commodity groups. We went into the anthuriums, so you can see all the color, and it was sort of done by color, from the green to whites and so on and so forth, and with a different genus and species identified. It was a nomenclature guide, which was another way also of educating the consumers and the florists, what the availability and what you would ask for. And so we have the anthuriums, of course, the orchids, and then we have the protea groups, the proteaceae, and then we have the tropicals, that's your ginger, your heliconia, and so on and so forth. And then we go into, it's so cool, foliages, all the wonderful foliages. I mean, that's one of the greatest finds, of course, with tropicals, is that there's some stunning foliages that are so exotic that adds this intrigue into so many of the designs. And it also, the surface coverage of it to cover foam, especially in those days, was a very important added plus. And then we wanted to share a little bit about lace, beautiful lace that I made here in Hawaii, because that's really specific so much to the island, and it's really the sign of aloha and goodwill, and we love that about that. And then we have the whole interior scape plant section that shows all the beautiful tropical plants, for interior scape, and that's available from Hawaii, that are just such a great selection. And then, of course, the orchid plants. That's the last section, and so many varieties of orchids that were available at that time, and so that was really exciting to show the diversity of the product through this beautiful guide. So then we went into the new edition, the Neotropica Hawaii second updated edition, which was published in 2017. And with this one, each commodity group was organized by color instead of by genus species. It was a little bit more florist-friendly, brighter new format, pixelized artwork, indicating new digital age. Sample design recipes of all tropical work with softer gardening look, Art Nouveau feel, introducing design concept, the Tropical Nouveau. At first, all products growing in Hawaii. So basically, it was introduced, the word Tropical Nouveau was introduced to the way to design all tropical flowers to make it a little bit softer with the Art Nouveau feel. That's kind of how it started. So a lot of the designs, like on this cover, for instance, has flowers outside of some of the flowers that's in the book, the typically available things that are from the growers there. And we just went out and foraged a little bit, and we put in the clerodendron. So these are all still tropicals that come from Hawaii, but you can see the addition of those kind of materials made this a little bit more softer and more has more added texture. You can see also here the addition of the maidenhair fern in conjunction with all the different tropicals that are in there, made it look a little bit softer. Also the inclusion of the lily grass, so that it had a little less harsher feel to it. That was the whole intent of this book, is that we wanted to show a different character of how flowers could be designed, so it doesn't have necessarily the former look that has sort of diminishing popularity. And you can see, like in this event work here, how you can do beautiful event work because the colors that are available are now just so much more diverse, and it does suit a beautiful wedding in this particular case. So this was kind of all about, now let's talk about designing with all tropicals, and let's soften it up with Art Nouveau, which then led to, hey, let's mix it up with the temperate flowers, because so many of the weddings that were happening in Hawaii, destination weddings, the brides were asking still for all temperate. It's all roses and hydrangeas, and it seemed out of place that they didn't have the sense of place that it was on the beach of Hawaii with the palm trees. So that's how we changed the whole idea of Tropical Nouveau to be a combination and to mix it up with temperates so that it really addresses the wedding market. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about today, and to look at what's happening today. What are the concerns for florists today? What do florists want to, how do they want to design with tropicals? And what are the challenges that they may run into thinking of designing with tropicals? So obviously the former mechanics were the foam, floral foam, and very much of it, so that the stem insertions are firmer and so that it doesn't create any kind of a mechanical problem. And so foam was a very big part of it. But today there's a segment of floristry, of florists that are really concerned about the amount of foam that's being used. And so they're kind of looking for other options. And of course, designing just straight into water and the mechanics of that'll be one of the things I'll be discussing as well. But just on the whole idea of foam, I wanted to go to what's today that's available that could really help you design with tropicals. And that is, I'm just going to show you a mechanic that I've already created here. And what that is it's foam that's inside of the container. But this time, the foam that I'm using is the new Smithers Oasis Terra Brick, which, by the way, is made largely from coconut core. And all of this, the material is 100% compostable. And so it becomes really a great choice. And the way it's supplied to us is it's not really a big brick. It's a thin brick, and it's nice and firm, and you can cut it up like you normally do foam, but it fits into the bottom, lower part of the container, so it's not a lot. So basically what I did was to place it at the bottom so that it's wedged tight in. And then I'm going to actually build a structure out of it using these are IKEA sticks, willow sticks that are called torca, that I cut it up and create a little bit of a structure so that it gives it a little bit of a guideline for where the tropicals might actually design into this. And so that is done. And then I also use the fasciated willow so that it introduces a little bit of curvature into this design, the main sort of template or the structure. And then I went ahead and used, actually these are banyan roots, that's ficus roots, that's from Hawaii. And this is kind of how I like to use it, where I bundle it together and I wrap, some of it is wired on the inside with just regular florist wire, and just the roots are kind of wrapped around it and bound with bullion wire, especially the dark brown or the copper bullion wire, then it blends in, and this then becomes part of the structure. And you can see really what the difference is of the harsh structure, the angularity of the sticks versus the curvilinear kind of a feel that is possible with a ficus. So what that does, it really gives you a softening quality, so that already as a silhouette, it's just feeling a little bit softer and more nouveau in feel. So that's what we're working with. The beauty of this, in addition to the fact that the foam is at the bottom to support the insertion, supported also by the stick structure so that it's then bind wire to it, so that it's really attached in 2 points. And then on top of that, what I'm going to do is actually put black river rock. Well, most of it's black, some of it is a different color. But I'm going to put river rock, because that's the other thing that you have to remember with tropicals. It's heavy stems, some of it. So you want to make sure that it has enough weight at the bottom. And so rock becomes the perfect cover for that, the Terra Brick. And so the foam actually simply disappears, but yet it's down below the rocks so that it gives it an attach point or insertion point. And then what I'm going to do is go ahead and fill it with water, so that really all of these sticks, all of the plant material that you end up using, looks like it's being designed into like a riverbed, like so that you see just pool of water with stone underneath, and you get this beautiful serene feeling of at the base, which means that we don't have to cover it all up, because that's one of the biggest, I think, issue always with foam, is that you didn't want any of the mechanics of foam to be seen, so you keep stuffing and covering, using much more product just to cover the foam. In this case, the foam is in there, the insertions of what pieces that needs to go into the design goes in, and then it's basically finished, that you don't have to keep adding more to cover the foam, because now it feels like a serene kind of water feature, and that becomes the mechanics. So I'm just finishing up the kind of the shape, the silhouette that I created. I filled it with flowers into that shape, that almost like a pattern, a template that I created. One of the first things that I used was the Gonfor carpus right here. This is kind of the foraged item from the fields of Maui. I've seen them there. It's a little bit of a weed that's out there. And so even though it's sort of not your typical tropical, but it gave me a starting off point because it has that gardeny feel. Look at that little bit of flowers that's on there as well. And of course, the other thing that I did to set up that this whole feel was to use the passion vine, which most of it has been stripped, but keeping some of the leaves at the tip so that you can see the greenery of it, because that's also atypical of a lot of the tropical foliages that are stiffer or they're smoother and bigger. This is a little bit more weedier, gardenier. Any kind of vines, actually, because if you even go into the rainforest and you see what is there, you'll see some of these beautiful big heliconias and that growing from the ground. By the way, you know, the way they come with that stick sort of cut off, that is a kind of a misconception, because that's certainly not how it grows. Where it's cut is where the leaf sort of draped over it. So you really want to kind of create the feel of what it really naturally grows like. And so to create sort of the forest canopy, kind of with vines kind of growing all over the place, and the tropicals are just kind of underneath it in a cluster with different color palettes selected to make this really work, is really the important story here. So again, the passion vine stripped so that it then attaches to the structure that I had built originally. So it's attached in several places so that it creates a canopy. And by the way, you know that the vine doesn't stay on its own. It needs to be stranded through something. So that's the reason why there was a structure like this, these sticks in here, so that it gets caught into those branches, and that's how it drapes. So you're really emulating what really occurs in nature. And then the next thing that I decided to use is the Cymbidium orchid. The Cymbidium orchid here, because that, again, the tropicals, and when I selected that, then it really married so perfectly with the Safari Sunset, the color sort of working together. That also allowed me to introduce the reds, or the kind of almost like a watermelon kind of red, so that with the Anthurium and also the ginger, these are just a small ginger, which doesn't dominate the design. It just kind of gives you nice dimension and nice little curl. The curvature is what I'm really playing on, and the pair of that and then shorter ones down below kind of creates this beautiful kind of framing effect on this side. And then with using that, then I wanted to, because the only orchid I actually have here are the Oncidium, and it's yellow. So then that becomes, now it's a story about really kind of the reds, different tints and tones of red, and then the yellow. And to connect to that, we need a bridging material, which really is the Guzmania right here, which has the red tips that goes with kind of red burgundy tips that goes with the Safari Sunset, but it goes into the yellow. And so that then segues and allows me to use the Oncidium, that is the real yellow. And the center of those Oncidium is that kind of orange yellow, which is the color of this. So you're kind of trying to bridge the colors so that they work together. Also allows me to go into the tints, the lighter tones of the ginger, which is really kind of like the protea here. These ones here, as well as this more pinkish with a little bit of orangey tone that actually goes, the spadix tip actually goes with this, the color of the Guzmania as well, so that you're kind of trying to connect the last insertion with the new insertion so that there's some connection, that it makes sense, so that you're not just using a color just because you like it, that there's a reason why it works here. So you can see in designing like this that it creates a very wonderful environment that is really like under the canopy of a rainforest that's invaded by this beautiful passion vine and what grows underneath. And just remember, because we did the mechanics as we did with the foam underneath, with the rocks and the water, I don't feel compelled that I have to keep stuffing it to lose the foam, because you don't see foam at all. But what I'm going to do is just kind of finish it off with foliages so that it has a little bit of a kind of foliage treatment on the outside. So I'm going to actually use a couple of different things, actually. First, I did start to use the Phoenix Robellini. That's this one here. It's very, very fine. And if you can, if you look into the history of art, and you look at Art Nouveau, that whole Art Nouveau period was typified by actually palms. There were palm houses, conservatories, and greenhouses that people in the Victorian era built to house palms. And so it really is a perfect foliage to go with that period of time, the Art Nouveau. So I'm going to go ahead and use this to kind of augment the design itself and allowing the curvature of the Phoenix Robellini to kind of hug on that surface to create that, continue that silhouette. And then instead of using like your regular Lawai fern, I chose to go with a curly Lawai because it has a lot more interesting texture, and it also seemed to fit with the feel of this design a little bit more. So I'm going to kind of insert that in various spots to just, not to cover foam, but to just give it a little bit of green presence so that it's not about just all flowers, that there is a little bit of greenery to support the feel of what's going on here. And then I'm going to take, this is actually a prize piece here. This is Anthurium Clarinerivium, beautiful piece. These are the kind of piece that you don't need to stuff with it, you just need one. It's a statement piece, and I'm just going to go ahead and use this one kind of to cradle the base of this design by inserting it in such a way so that you see a little bit of the flip side of the foliage as well as the little bit of the front side. So I'm going to kind of do something like this so that you see a little bit of that and the shape of this to go with the shape of the Anthurium itself. And it gives it just a little bit of distinction. I also noticed that there's a spot that seems like we need an extension of Oncidium. So I have this piece that was cut back because I took a short piece and put it in the back side. So I'm going to go ahead and use this to kind of put to the front side so it sort of flows out of the design perhaps. So it's really just styling it at this point so that it makes sense of the colors and then the flow of the design itself. And a collection that's just kind of luscious. It's just like so, it's so tropical, but yet it doesn't have the usual tropical feel, the typical tropical design look. I think that's kind of what Neotropica is. It's sort of the unexpected. Is it really all tropicals? It seems so much softer than what you normally see in a tropical design, but yes, indeed. Every piece of flower and foliage that I used here are tropical, that are found on the islands of all the different islands of Hawaii. And but what we've done is actually kind of come up with the use of a little bit more of that kind of forage look, the vines, and again, the Gomphora carpus, that gives us a feeling of this field flower, sort of gardeny, the wild look. And I think that's what distinguishes that kind of the gardeny look that is so popular today. And this is a way we can actually introduce it into the Neotropica, all tropical design that has that similar feel that everybody's loving right now. So today I want to complete the presentation on sort of what has happened with the use of tropicals over the last 20, 30 years. And so really more currently, and in the past several years, we've done these wedding celebration kind of concept using the temperates and tropicals combined to create the tropical nouveau look. So I wanted to kind of show you how that system really works. And it's really a combination of the temperates and tropicals to get that soft feeling, the curvaceousness, the little bit more gardenier look, which is really prevalent within the sort of the wedding industry. That's what the brides are really loving, not anything stiff and modern. So I wanted to show you this to give you an idea of what it looks like and how we create it. So the difference between sort of the typically sort of the harsher tropical, all tropical look versus this combination is that this has a lot more curvilinear lines, flows, and that's really the nouveau portion. When you say tropical nouveau, it kind of conjures up that look of the Art Nouveau, the curvilinearness of the vines, and that is ever present in this kind of style of design with the use of the vine. So basically what I created was a structure into which I added the passion vine that are largely stripped of the leaves so that you see more of the linear flow, and of course having the growing tips to indicate the kind of the wonderful fresh growth kind of a look. And so that gives you sort of the framework for which, into which that we design the flowers. I chose to design with some of the popular colors today in bridal work, in the pinks, the peaches, to kind of with a brownier tone, the little muddier look of the toffee roses, one of the favorites of so many of the brides. And with that, I wanted to use and feature the anthuriums that are so suitable for this look. And for this, I used the Toyama peach. I actually just used only one because it's a bigger flower. It dominates visually very much into the space that's created here, the negative space that's created here, and wanted to feature it sort of front and foremost so that it has a relationship with that muddied kind of a peachy toffee rose that we have here. And also to complement the pinks in this, which by the way is represented by the protea right here that has that beautiful pink with a little fuzzy kind of a burgundyish kind of a furry kind of a look to it. And it's really such an exotic flower that is so beautiful to feature. And then to accompany that kind of a more elongated the amnicola type of anthurium that features the pinks and kind of a mauve pink, I guess it would be. And they also have the spadix that are a little bit darker in color so that it's not a glaring yellow spadix or anything that kind of takes away from the color combination that we have here. And to strengthen the peach, I actually have taken, these are cotoneaster berries right now, that's orange, that's turning a little bit more peachier, to add a little dimension to the different textures that's into this, because the kind of the berry look and then the seeded look of the eucalyptus is also another part of the textural works that is prevalent in the tropical nouveau look. Also, the chocolate lace, or it's a type of Queen Anne's lace with a little darker color. Again, some of that darker burgundyish tone picks up the same kind of coloring that's on this protea. So there's a lot more bridging of material that helps with the color relationship and also with the visual flow and the texture of all of these materials. So in this, the tropicals are the Safari Sunset, we have the Passion Vine, we have also the Podocarpus, the greenery, one of the finer greenery that's in the palette for the tropicals. We also have the protea, and then we have also two different varieties, actually 3 different varieties of anthurium. There's some that are just so beautiful, slender, sort of more teardrop kind of a shape that just sort of stretches out, that has that grace of the Art Nouveau kind of a feel. So what I wanted to do is kind of do something in backwards, because so often in demonstration I build up from the basic structure. I wanted to show you the finish, and I want to break it down so that you can see the core mechanics, because in doing so you can so much more understand why the actual structure that I start with and how it works. So I wanted to kind of do that in front of you so that you can see how the system works. And now we're down to the absolute bare bone, and I don't need to take anything away now, but you can see that the use of the passion vine here is in such a way so that it creates this beautiful shape that I really wanted as a silhouette to this design. And what it does is it allows space in and around to keep some really beautiful linear flow happening so that it has that very Art Nouveau look, even though that we're using something, all these flowers in a very full manner down below. So it gives you that extension of growth and extension sort of wildness with the tendrils. You know, when you start out with a framing that sets the tone for what the end result is, it's kind of like a sketch or even like a coloring book. When you have an outline and you kind of follow it naturally, then you're going to get the end result that you're looking for. So I wanted to show you this, and basically this is what it is. I mean, this could very well be for a hand-tied bouquet, and you just slip your flowers and your foliages into this. And basically what it is actually 1/2 of a pillow, a holly chapel pillow, with a chicken wire roll cradled into that kind of that concaveness of that one piece of half a pillow. And so this could easily be for a hand-tied bouquet as well, or in this case, just set into water so that then we can design into it. So I wanted to show you that mechanics because I think that's really the most important part of how I created this particular design. So I finished making this particular piece. This is kind of the Neotropica, the little bit more softer, tropical nouveau, that nouveau kind of a look, a little bit more gardenier, a little bit more wispier, airier. There's a lot more negative spaces. It's not solid and heavy. It has air and it breathes. It's a real challenge because with some of the colors that we have with the tropicals, the anthuriums, where I have some that are kind of the peachy tones that goes with the heliconia, hanging heliconia that has the yellow to peach tone. So I wanted to put those sort of to the front of the design with a little bit of the orange and the red in behind so that it really does connect with some of the coloring of the heliconia because there's a lot of orange and red in it as well. So it's really about bridging the colors again, try to flow it from the red to orange to the peach and then to the kind of the soft yellow. So we really picked a lot of material like the Guzmania here is a yellow-orange with a little bit of peachy tone, as is the heliconia hanging. Now, the difference between this design too, then when you're using an upright heliconia that's really heavy and very upright, the key is, the difference is instead of letting it go really tall and be so dominant in that kind of a landscape, I wanted the heliconia to be inside mixed with all the other flowers so that you're getting a lot more softness and that it doesn't become quite as dominant and heavy. So that's the whole idea, is to just sort of paint it so that one color bleeds into the other. So, you know, when I was experimenting with this, I really felt like the red was so loud when it came forward. So that's why it's receding. The other thing that I did was initially, you know, when I actually strung the passion vine to kind of soften the lines and then also using the palm to make it go more sideways and horizontal rather than so much upright. Because really that's one of the best things about using the clear glass cylinders is that they actually serve almost like a giant water tube. And so, you know, you really see a lot of transparency below so that it almost looks like that all that material is sort of floating above the table. And I really like that about it. This could be like a buffet, or like it could be in on a credenza at a hotel, so that it's a one-sided, like forward-facing design with all the displays going sideways but more horizontal than it is vertical. So that's kind of really how I designed this, so that it has a much more different appeal that flows probably much better in wedding work than it would be to have that real upright vertical. So I hope that I was kind of able to give you some insight as to kind of the history of tropical designs in general from the 80s, the 90s, and into the 2000s. And then here we are, 2021, looking at the potential of using all tropicals for wedding work. So if you have any questions about mechanics, you know, the how-tos about this, perhaps you might just want to wait, because I actually met up with a friend of mine who's the next presenter, who is actually in Hawaii. And so we're going to sort of hook up with him virtually. And at the end of this whole program, we'll have a Q&A to answer all your questions about how to design with all tropicals. Oh my gosh, look at you. Beautiful background. You are so lucky, lucky, seriously.
Hi, Hitomi. How are you today?
Very good, thank you. You're getting a little bit of a tan?
Oh my gosh, it is beautiful here in Hawaii. We're on the island of Hawaii, and it's so different than Philadelphia this time of year. So I'm so thrilled to be here. Beautiful sunshine, gorgeous, gorgeous ocean views, and a beautiful breeze, and it's just a beautiful day. So I'm so fortunate to be here, and I thank you for inviting me to be a part of this and for allowing me to come and to experiment and to create with the Hawaiian flowers. But even more importantly, thank you for the opportunity to tour the farms here on the island of Hawaii. We had a chance the other day to tour 6 different farms, and I was able to see the beautiful varieties that are being grown and even some new ones that are being developed through the University of Hawaii and partnerships they have with some growers. I was able to see the entire process from harvesting the flowers to cleaning them to getting them ready for customs to the beautiful way they pack flowers so that they can arrive to us, the designers, so that we can use them. And as a bonus,
cool.
I got, oh my gosh, it was wonderful. I didn't understand, even though I've been in the business this many years, I didn't understand all that goes on behind the scenes. And I know I personally have so much more respect for the product after witnessing that. But as a bonus, I got to see the culture of the people that develop and grow and harvest and pack these flowers. And they are like a family that work together like a machine. Every one of them do their job so well so that they can provide us with the very best product. And we are just so fortunate to have it available to us. And I know as a designer, I can't wait to work today, but I also can't wait to go back home and be able to order these flowers even more often and incorporate them in my design so that my customers can appreciate their beauty and see all the beautiful Hawaiian tropical flowers in an arrangement.
So do we get a peek at your tour? Can we do that?
Absolutely. So we were lucky enough, we took some footage from each of the farms we went to. So we're going to share that with our audience right now. So sit back, enjoy this tour that I had, because I know I enjoyed every minute of it.
This red one, I need a couple whole fire.
We have that here, we'll do them all together.
Yeah. This is the variant.
They're beautiful, and the coloring is incredible, but tell us how rare these are.
These are very rare. You know, I have people coming from Belgium, the Netherlands, South Africa.
Beautiful one back here with the very good foliage.
This actually, the Puna gold was actually the first yellow Zumania solid yellow in the world.
Maybe this is an example of
Oh, I see some getting color here too. Yeah. And if you do that over and over and over again, you get a whole row just like this, right?
yeah, but usually I recommend to put them into a pan or something if you want to go over there.
Sure.
You have 10
Active variety orangey.
Yeah. They need a lot of moisture. If you water them every day, they will get back.
A very long cane off one of the plants that are here. Cut it to whatever length you need to get the bulk of the green in whatever.
Because once you start to cut them, then they got to fill back in, you know, up to violet, I guess. All right.
Too many things in the same space.
Yeah. Just, and all these plants do, they always go from the bottom up.
Really cool. We have other greenhouses that are built for farm production. These are going to be Galarams. It's just beautiful. And the vibrancy of this yellow is incredible. Just beautiful. And again,
It's a yellow with a green tinge in it. It's a new one that green. It's been around for a while.
just beautiful. Flower, but each one of them, they're just so different. One of them, like each that beautiful pink, and even the center having the yellow.
Fantastic.
Great work. Wow, how beautiful. Is that a gorgeous lake?
That's nice.
All right.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Aloha.
Wow, that was pretty cool. You got to see a lot. I'm just like thrilled to see what kind of product you got from there and what you're gonna do with them. Exciting.
Well, I will tell you, all the farmers were so generous in sending product to us to use, and I was like a kid in a candy store deciding on some things to use. So, of course, this entire program today is part of wedding celebrations. So there's 4 different arrangements we're going to do today. So the first one I wanted to do was a bridesmaid bouquet. Again, using the neotropical, the new tropical look where it's just tropical flowers together, not mixed with other temperate flowers. What can we create to make something that's beautiful for a wedding that doesn't have that older, very architectural, hardline, tropical feel to it? So I wanted to do something different, and I wanted to create an armature. So I started with that, and we used the Oasis rustic wire and cut this into segments. And we basically cut 8 segments into basically my arm length from my entire wingspan side to side and just folded it in half. We've done that 8 times. And then we've taken all 8 of these pieces, and where they're bent in half, that will be the bottom of the holder for the bouquet. And then we're just going to take another piece of the rustic wire, and we're going to twist it very tightly around there, and then tie it till it gets pinched very hard, and put that down into the handle. And this is what we're going to use to start to create the armature. We have seen many different techniques where people create a chicken wire out of a wire, and this is basically another adaptation of that form where we're going to create a bouquet holder or a structure so that we're able to insert our flowers into there, so we again can use fewer flowers, have more control over where the flowers are actually going to land, but also have it be a structure that keeps them in place and allows them to be hand tied together in a bouquet that'd be beautiful for a wedding. So once we have those 8 pieces in place, we're basically going to start, and I'm going to show you the start and then show you the finished product for the armature, and then we'll add flowers. But I'm not going to bore you with, a half-hour lecture on how to create this. But we basically take 2 pieces of the wire, and I use my thumb, and I put them around my thumb and twist it 3 times till I get like a circle that you can see there. Then I'm taking 2 more pieces of the rustic wire, put my thumb in there. I'm going to twist always 1, 2, 3 times. And I have the second. Take 2 more of the rustic wire, put my thumb in between, and we're going to twist 1, 2, 3. And we're going to continue this process all the way around until we have 8 pairs of those wires twisted together with 3 turns. And it will actually almost look like a flower. If you can see this, it will almost look like a flower with petals around the entire perimeter as we get done that. We're going to take this pair, 1, 2, 3, and then another pair. 1, 2, 3, and why I'm using my thumb in between here is for two reasons. One, it's on my hand, which is already right here where I need it to be, but also because it'll give us a consistent first row of openings in this bouquet holder. By using my thumb, it's the same gauge pretty much every time that we work around, and there'll be a very consistent row of openings, or we'll say petals, in this bouquet holder in the first row. And that'll get us off to a real good start. So, as you can see, I'm going to come around actually and show you. This is what we see up close, and that's the beginning. Next, we're going to take pairs from the opposite pairs, one on each side, and make that the next opening. So I'm going to go back and do that for you. I'm going to take that and, again, use my thumb to get it a little bit more away from the center. So these openings, the next level out, are even a little bit bigger. And as we go further away from the center, each segment is going to have a larger opening as we move away from the radius of this bouquet. And 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And 1, 2, 3. And the last one. 1, 2, 3. And then if we start to flatten it up, you'll almost notice it's starting to look like almost like the rosette of a stained glass window where you have some openings there. So we're going to continue on that process and do it for another 2, maybe 3 layers out to give us a flat surface that becomes the network that we can then insert our stems into in this Neotropical bouquet. So if we continue on that.
That's quite fabulous, Tim, because Tim, you know, that bark wire is so much like the banyan roots.
The banyan
the color
root,
of the
isn't
banyan
it?
roots, right?
Yeah. Thank you,
It's
Hitomi.
fabulous.
That was actually my inspiration for it. And I really wanted to make something very organic looking, and this has that organic look. A lot of brides are looking for that now, where they don't want things that are looking too recipe'd out or look like it was from somebody else's wedding. Something that was more organic, natural looking, and this gives us that very organic look. But it also gives us the control by having the wire center to it. It also gives us the control to do exactly. This would be almost impossible to recreate with banyan root because it's so much more limp and softer and maybe even brittle at points. So this will give us the control to do that. So this is basically the bouquet holder from the front, from the side, and from the back. And we're going to leave these long for now. We may end up cutting them later, but we never know where we're going to end up. But we're going to leave these ends long for now. But that's what I need to create the network. Okay, so the first flowers that I selected were the protea flower, and I think these are just gorgeous, these pink protea. I love them because of the textural interest that they bring to a design. I also love the fact that they're so dominant, both the form of the flower and the uniqueness and the texture make it a very dominant element to add into any bouquet. So we're gonna make this the focal area of the bouquet, and we're gonna start just by putting a leaf, a single monstera leaf, into this bouquet first, to give a little bit of a background. And then we're going to start to sew the protea flowers into this bouquet. And we can actually, if we need, we can pierce right through the monstera if we need to do that to get a flower into the place that we really want it to be. And that's what I'm doing right here. I'm going to 1, 2, 3. So you see how beautiful those 3 protea are there, and you'll know that the eye will naturally be drawn right to them. The next I'm going to use would be some of these beautiful, the mini ginger. And again, they're not very large or smaller, and we're so used to seeing these in tall or linear designs, but tucked in tightly into bouquets like this, they can be just as effective for adding a beautiful color and another, glossy tone or finish to the bouquet, but also the fragrance. Most people don't take the time to actually smell the ginger, but they have a beautiful fragrance to them. So we're gonna pop these into this bouquet as well, and we're gonna cluster them all together into one part of the bouquet. And I'll try to hold this up so you can see where I'm putting all these. And then we're gonna create just another beautiful grouping in towards inside of this bouquet. There we go. Isn't that fabulous? Just beautiful color. Again, mimicking the color of the protea already, just with a little bit more intense shade. And the next thing we're going to put into here would be some beautiful Anthurium. And I was able to see these actually growing at Greenpoint Nursery the other day. Beautiful, beautiful varieties. And if you're not sure about what variety you want, speak to your salesperson at any of these farms and say, hey, I want something that's a solid light pink, or I want something that's maybe pink with a little bit of green veining to it. And they'll be able to help you to find the perfect variety in both size of flower, shape of flower, and color that you have in mind for your bouquet. So we're going to take a couple of these and start to sew these into the network that we have here already. And I love with Anthuriums just layering one on top of another on top of another. It's within our design world, it's what we call terracing, where it helps us to bring the eye into the center of the bouquet, because your eye will find one and then naturally take that stair step up to the next one. As you can see, it's very windy out here. And even to the next area, and even to another part of the design. So your eye will find that spat, the center part of the flower, because of the contrast, the natural contrast that the flower has. That yellow spat really sticks out against the pink, leathery texture of the Anthurium. And it's a way for your eye to go from here to here to here, and then to here, and draw your eye into the center of the bouquet. We're also going to put into this bouquet one stem of, it's actually a half of a stem of this gorgeous mini Cymbidium orchid in that mauve tone. And that's going to be another shade of pink that's going to work very nicely into this design. And we may need to take a couple more flowers off. And we're going to tuck this down in here and have it spin maybe a little bit off to that one side. And then I think I just want to address maybe something in this area. So when I create, and what I like to teach other designers is, flowers are not like IKEA products. You don't just put something in, A doesn't meet to A and B meets to B. Sometimes you really have to look at the composition and the placement of the previous flowers between them already to decide what the next placement is. So I'm also going to take some of the Xanadu leaves, and these didn't have quite as long of a stem that I wanted originally. So I added in a piece of heavy gauge wire, an 18 gauge wire, into the stem and just floral taped it in there. And we're going to just, again, pierce this through and bring these out and just have them lightly shelter what's underneath. I find that in sheltering and floral design, it's one of those techniques that we use that really helps to draw attention to certain areas and certain flowers. And that's what we're doing with this. We're bringing them in, and the fact that these are lightly covering what's underneath, it makes the person looking at our bouquet almost want to crawl underneath and see what's under there, so that it becomes even more important to the eye. So that's why I use just those two Xanadu leaves in there. So at this point, I'm going to take a little bit more of this rustic wire, and I'm going to bend some of these up, and I'm going to actually tie off the basic part of the bouquet for right now. So we're going to give it some pretty good tension, physical tension that is, as we tie this, and make sure that all those stems are really locked in nicely into place. We're maybe going to go around maybe 3 times, and then we are going to twist those two pieces of wire together to make sure that this stays very nicely together as a hand-tied bouquet. And then we're going to finish this up a little bit. So I'm tying that now, I'm cutting that off, and I'm going to tuck this back into the bouquet so that nobody could ever get poked by that wire. And I'm going to make sure that I cut very close the wires that were on the Xanadu leaves, because I don't want them to be down in the handle of the bouquet for a bride to poke herself with, or to get herself with later. And this one I could actually tuck up. It was long enough I could tuck it up in there so it's a rounded edge. So I'm going to take these stems and just give them a cut, and cut it a little bit shorter now, so it's a little bit more manageable for me. But now what I want to do is decide, okay, I think that's about the top of the bouquet for me. So what I want to do now is take some of these beautiful extensions and have the bouquet become more of a cascade now, as opposed to being something that was very radial before, where everything stuck out like spokes on the wheel. Everything's going to cascade down a little bit more, and again, we're actually adding a principle of design called tension to this bouquet, because we're allowing the energy of gravity to be seen in this, where things kind of come up and then the gravity is just going to drip down and have your eye go down on this line. So that's what we're trying to do, is add in some of the knowledge base that we have as designers to the design to make our design just both aesthetically beautiful and pleasing, but also technically very important and very interesting as design. So if you can see how already, see how there's that feeling that is just flowing over into the front in that design. So the last thing that I'm going to do is now I'm going to, I'll cut this a little bit shorter to begin with. Actually, there's two more things I have to do to this bouquet. The first one would be, as I'm going to add some of the Cymbidiums, I'm going to add onto these tendrils of the rustic wire that we have here. So I'm going to lay the bouquet down for now, maybe face it about that way to you. A little bit earlier, I took some of the mini Cymbidiums off the stem, that long stem that we had. The bottom half of that, I took the individual flowers off and put a very thin piece of wire in there and then taped that with the brown floral tape so that it very closely mimics the rustic wire that we have here. And I'm just going to take them, and as if it was just tendrils from a plant, we're just going to wind them around in spirals around each piece of rustic wire, any piece of rustic wire that we feel needs that. And what that's going to do is literally bring the floral element from the main part of the bouquet down into the cascade and the front, and just add so much drama and motion and interest to this bouquet. So for us designers that are out there and showing these things to our brides, don't assume that they want the same old, same old. There are some people out there that really want their wedding to be unique and be different, and have their bouquet be the one that people say, oh my gosh, that bouquet was stunning. That bouquet was incredible. Where did you get that? And we can do this as designers every day if we just think about the materials that we're using and how we can use them to make not just a floral arrangement, but a piece of art. And then the very last addition to this bouquet, let me just lay this down for a second. Hitomi, you had mentioned the banyan root, so we actually have some here as well too. And really what'll happen with this is visually it'll all become the same. The customer and people viewing this bouquet will not be able to tell the difference of what was the banyan root and what was the barked wire, because visually it just blends so beautifully together. We're using both the principles of unity and harmony in this bouquet, in that we're harmonizing all the materials in this bouquet by putting in some beautiful things that were all grown in the same part of the world or the same zone. And we're unifying the bouquet by having things in there that just kind of go up and down and all around. And if we just take this and add a little bit here, and again, we're gonna fold this and maybe put this up on this side, just to start to back the bouquet with a little bit more organic material. And then we'll need just maybe another piece of bind wire in a second to secure it all and make this a finished composition. So let's get, I have a couple loose ends here I'm just trying to tie up, literally. And you know what you want to do with it? We'll bring this out to the front here again, but you know, look at the drama that something like that has. I mean, it beautifully cascades down, and I could see this with the bride holding in front of her, but I mean, wouldn't it be incredible with a bridesmaid even to hold it off to one side and just allowing that banyan root to drag along the ground as they're coming down the aisle? It just is something that's going to have, it's going to draw attention, it's going to make their day extra special, but you as a floral designer will be the expert in your town or your county or your state, because you did something unique. You did something with all tropical flowers. Right now, this is so important because we have many brides that had to cancel their destination weddings because they can't travel. Well, there's no reason why they can't still have that destination look in your hometown, and let the flowers be the things that bring that mood and bring that environment to their wedding. So this is our Aloha Bridesmaid Bouquet, and we'll be back in a little bit with another bouquet for you. Okay, so next we're going to create a quick bridal bouquet. This is maybe not as large as the Bridesmaid's Bouquet that we've already created, but this one will be a little bit more special, a little bit more different, just because of the color palette that we're using, a softer color palette, which is again something very unique to that tropical flower reputation, as we've said. Most people, and even florists, when you think about, I want a bouquet of all tropical flowers, you think of red and orange almost immediately, because those iconic Anthurium and Bird of Paradise and Heliconia have been that mainstay for so long for tropical flowers. But with weddings, that color harmony may not be the one that they were looking for. They want something softer, want something more romantic. And that's what I'd like to share in this next bouquet, is how to use that softer color palette with all tropical flowers to create a very stunning bride's bouquet. And even just this by itself, it's one of those flowers that it has this natural focal area, because it has this row towards the outside that's just framing all this beautiful velvety texture on the inside. And then again, the pollen that you see in the anthers in that ring of yellow. So there's this natural area that draws your eye, boom, right into this flower. So we're gonna take this and make this the showcase in this bouquet and the featured item, but there'll be plenty more to this bouquet, so that it'll be a gorgeous creation for the bride that's gonna carry it. But we're gonna do this without an armature. We're gonna start with the protea, and we're gonna take some of the beautiful Song of India, and that's a type of Dracaena. Again, when we visited the farms, you saw that in the video earlier, there are so many beautiful varieties of Dracaena that are grown here on the island of Hawaii, that this one in particular is a little softer, because it has that lemon yellow striping to the leaf, and the leaves a little bit more compact together, where you get it's almost like a flower if you look at it, in that it has that radial pattern and petal after petal. So we're going to take that and we're going to start to cluster these around this beautiful protea, to give us a little bit of a network that we can start to sew some of our other flowers into. And the next thing I think I want to do is maybe some of these very big and very beautiful ginger again. And again, look at those ginger. We're gonna put two on this side, and we'll put just this one incredible large one on this side right here. And look already together how the beauty of those flowers, they're so different from each other, that we have that principle of contrast working so well already in this bouquet, because we have, again, opposite colors, greens and reds, or greens and pinks, opposite each other. They're opposing each other on the color wheel, that we have great contrast in color already. Forms, look at the different forms. We have these dome-shaped ginger against this very large circle of the protea, and again, the triangular leaves of the Dracaena plant. So interesting forms that are contrasting in this bouquet already. And texture. Again, I think texture is so beautiful in design, and we know we've created a good design that has interesting texture when the person looking at the bouquet is not only drawn in with their eyes, but they're drawn in with their hands, and they just got to get in and, oh my gosh, feel this almost rubber-like texture against, this is like velvet in the inside, and these almost are sharp towards the outside. So that texture is something that becomes so important to us as designers, and I feel like it's one of the most important elements of design in the marketplace now. That's the language that we can use to convey those same feelings to our customers, so that they're more comfortable using tropical flowers, because we start to talk about soft textures and more pastel or toned down colors. Now we're talking language that resonates with our bride. So it's up to us to be the professional and use that language to allow them to understand this is where we're going with their bouquet. This Anthurium, this next one, I mean, look at the color on that. Isn't that just fabulous? It is basically, it almost looks like it's out of a Monet painting, because it has the white with that washing of green as we move towards the outside. So we're just going to put a couple of these in here. I never realized how many different pastels were available, and again, each variety is even more unique than the next. But you know, again, I've challenged myself now to learn more about these varieties and know their names and know their availabilities, and to know what I want to ask for, so that I can create something with something as dynamic as that. That flower alone just draws me to this bouquet, doesn't it? It's just gorgeous. And we're going to take a little bit of the bamboo, just to add again a little bit more lightness to this bouquet, and we've stripped off almost all the foliage, just leaving the very tips there, and that gives us this, again, another energy of new growth in the bouquet, where we have just a little bit of something that's that light pale, very light, very ethereal green that's in that bouquet. And then what else? I don't think we need anything else in that right now. Maybe we'll just put a little bit of this beautiful fern in here, and we're gonna maybe have one going in each direction on this right now. And again, it doesn't all need to be on the outside. Having things into the bouquet where your eye is drawn in instead of it being collaring on the outside, this helps to add some depth and some rhythm in the bouquet as well. It makes your eye go from the outside in and find its way back to the center and then move out again. I'm gonna tie this together for now with, again, a piece of that rustic wire. I love using this with the tropical flowers because, again, it lends itself to that same aura and same feeling. And we're gonna just clip this close and then cut some flowers a little bit shorter so that it becomes more manageable. I hope you can enjoy that view as I'm cutting these flowers. And if you take care of your tropical flowers, they will last so very long. You don't have to worry about doing everything last minute. They could be done ahead of time, putting in beautiful vases and just have something gorgeous. And what we're going to add now, we're going to take the rustic wire, and we've used this just to tie the bouquet, but many of our brides are looking for something with a little bit of glam to it or a little bit of sparkle. So I've taken the same rustic wire and I've added in another texture, which is, believe it or not, just a little bit of this eyelash yarn. And I don't know if you can see the way it almost glistens in the light, because it has a little bit of like a mica fleck in it, or a little bit of an iridescence to it. But we've just spun this around just lengths of this rustic wire. And if we take this and we encircle the bouquet in maybe a couple different areas, and again, not having them be perfect circles, but be more natural, viney, wandering or meandering lines that go around the bouquet and lightly, very lightly shelter that incredible protea that's in the center there. And yeah, I think, yeah, can you see how that reflection that comes off that little bit of an accent that's on that rustic wire just adds another element to this bouquet and something really beautiful. And again, these can be twisted or turned in many different directions, but let's bring them to about here for now. And then the last thing I wanted to add to this bouquet, but I have a couple of extensions of beautiful dendrobium. So if we take this, and we've taken this and we've actually looped it so it becomes a curve, and then we've taken this one and we've basically folded it in half, and we're going to tuck this one up under here as well too, and we're going to just tie these, and then there. So now we have, again, another beautiful cascading motion, and something that, you know, as a bride were to walk down the aisle and towards the people at her wedding, there's this beautiful bouquet up here, and also just this dripping and this raining of the gorgeous dendrobium orchids that you can actually order from here in Hawaii to come to you like that, so that you don't have to sit there and string them all day long. They're ready to put in there, but it has that feeling of that floral lei and that Hawaiian welcome. And I don't think there'd be a guest at the wedding that wouldn't feel welcome when they saw the bride walking down the aisle with something like this. So I will finish off the handle of this later, but that's basically what I wanted to show you as far as the bouquet that we could have for a bride for a beautiful beach wedding, or even a beach-themed wedding with all tropical flowers.
So what are some of the other ideas that you can show us that would expand the wedding market for a lot more brides to be interested in tropical flowers?
So Hitomi, I think there are so many opportunities that we as florists miss, and that's in the add-on sales with weddings. Of course, you know, people come in and they want the bouquets for the bridal party, the boutonnieres and corsages for the family members, something for the ceremony, and usually something for the reception tables as well too. But if you think about it, in addition to the big ticket items like arches and flower walls, there's other add-on sales that can become very profitable for us to have in a flower shop. And really, these are the the most efficient things to do because we're already going to service this wedding anyway. We're going there to set up. We have people committed to be there. So taking other items to the same place, using more of the same flowers that we've used elsewhere in the wedding is really the most profitable and most efficient way for florists to work. So something that I've seen that's underutilized is that suggestion to make a chair back or a chair covering or a chair decoration of some sort for the bride and groom. So often now, those two chairs, they're at a sweetheart table, and many times as people enter the room, it's the back of those two chairs that people see, and then the rest of the room is in front of that table as they look at the rest of the room for the reception. But wouldn't it be a great addition to, when those doors open and people see the backs of those chairs, to see something beautiful that's floral on those chairs, and that really sets the tone for the wedding. So if I was doing a tropical wedding, this is something that I know most brides aren't coming to me to talk about, but after we talked about A, B, C, and D, and we've got the whole package together, I might just say, hey, I have an idea. I'd like to do this for your wedding to make it special. And it's just that add-on that most brides, they're going to say yes. You know, if they were already at 100% of their budget, if they need to go to 105 or 110, they'll do it if you create the need through the description that you use of the romance of the language of flowers and the special treatment that you're giving this bride and groom to have something very unusual and very unique at their wedding to set their wedding apart. So that's what I want to create for you today. So we have one of these chairs from the terrace, and we're using that same technique that we used on the very first bouquet we did for the bridesmaid, but instead of making a round form, we're making a rectangular form, and we've taken the rustic wire, and this is it in the green tone, which is again going to disappear much more inside of flowers that are more lighter in color and more pastel in color, and doesn't look as woodlandish or like jungle-ish as much as it looks like a vine. So we've created this form where we've started again in the regular pattern, and same thing, we're going to take our thumb, put it in place, and twist 1, 2, 3 to create another layer, and twist 1, 2, 3 again until we get this as long as we want this to be. And for this, we've actually, this is kind of like Julia Childish where we're working, where we have something already, but we've taken this, we've made it a little bit longer. And the nice part is that this is a mechanic that is so easily adaptable to almost any chair that you're going to come to, because this part of the bouquet or the arrangement, you're going to just mold. And that is literally going to hang on the back of that chair. And that gives us this network now that we can start to insert some flowers into. So let's just see some of the flowers that we've picked here while we're in the islands, and that we're going to use to develop a beautiful chair back treatment. And of course we would do 2 of these, but we're going to just show you 1 today. For the ease of speed right now and to move along, each of the items that are more delicate, the Monstera is fine, but many of the other items that we're putting here is once we put them into this mechanic, we're going to want to put a little water tube in there and make sure that that tube is concealed behind other materials. But for the ease of demonstration, I'm not going to put that part in right now, but I'm just going to show you how we're going to design with this. So if we take this Monstera and we actually are sewing it between some of the wire structure that we have here. So if we go in and out and in again, let's just turn this so you can see. You know, look how beautiful even just 1 leaf is on there already. And it's giving us a direction. It's actually bringing our eye down and starting to give us some line and some movement to this bouquet. We're going to bring our eye down. And what we're going to add to this is, let's see what I want to do. And this, again, we're just going to create as we go along. I've selected some materials, but haven't really decided what I had to do exactly with this. But if we take the passion vine, and I'm going to take off many of the leaves on here so that the vine itself becomes more predominant or more dominant. And this is moving on me right now, so I got to pinch it on there better. But what if I just arc this over and grab one of the tendrils of the rustic wire on one side, and we're going to grab it on the other side, and just have this wind right around the passion vine. It's almost reversed. Passion vine usually has those tendrils that wind around something else to grab it, but we're going to use the tendrils from the rustic wire to grab the passion vine. And I mean, again, we have this beautiful arcing motion that goes up and over and already has depth to this because of the way the passion vine stands out so much higher than the vine or the vine, I'm sorry, not the vine wire, the rustic wire that we have on the chair already. And let's just take a couple of other flowers. Let's see what would be next. I think maybe if I take the hala and I'm gonna put that in on an angle, and I may need to just trim this blade a little bit so it becomes a little bit more slender and it works through these materials that we have here a little bit better. And we're gonna have that go up and over and move down. And we're gonna repeat that with another one. And same thing, we're gonna tuck this one maybe behind the monstera leaf and have that angled down as well too. This one I might need to move over just a little bit here. Next, I think I'm going to take some of these beautiful rattlesnake calathea, I believe, and we're going to wind these through. Now these, because they're a little bit heavier, you're going to want to take a piece of bind wire and actually tie them into place. And if we take this and we make sure we grab the stem of the calathea at a point where there's an actual maybe kink or a knot in the rustic wire, and we just twist it a couple of times there, that will be enough to hold that in place. And we'll take another one. And work this one maybe up a little bit higher so that it grabs our eye nicely and starts to bring your eye up into the main part of this design. And again, just a little piece of bind wire tying this in place here.
So Tim, with this kind of idea with the chairs, you would probably get a chair that you can work off of back at the shop so that you can prepare this ahead of time so that it's just an easy slip and over, right?
That would be even better. Of course, you could do it on site if you wanted to, but if you got a mimic of the chair that's at the banquet facility or the venue, you could do both these ahead of time and literally lift this off.
Exactly.
Come back in.
That's awesome.
Drop it. It's almost like a cuff bouquet where you'd have something that can just kind of lift off and go back on again.
Yeah.
Now,
actually, don't you think that a lot of the flowers to wear, small pieces, really lends itself to a bigger version that can be decorations?
Oh, absolutely. And that's where we as floral designers, we can just start to think of how we can apply things we've learned in different ways and to suggest ways to our customers that, you know, there may be, like you said, a wrist corsage that you're interpreting into a bouquet like this, or a bride's bouquet that you're interpreting again. But how can we work that into our work and suggest them? Because every design is basically a design that needs to be proper, following the elements and principles of design. So if we start to apply those elements and principles and the things we've learned into many different applications, the creativity is just endless, isn't it? There's no stopping what we can do. I bought a lot of flowers here to do this, but it really doesn't take much. It does not take much at all to make something gorgeous on these. And really, if you think about it, the armature part of it is something that if you went back to the venue to pick up the flowers, you could probably just pick that up, take it back, and have it ready to reuse again. And that part of your investment is something you can recoup over and over again.
I think that's kind of new floristry, where you have a lot of mechanics that's ready-made that you use for events over and over again, so that it really is being recycled or repurposed. I think it's really a great idea.
Yeah, and just because you're recycling it doesn't mean it has to be the same. You could have totally different flowers in this the next time, and it wouldn't even be recognizable to anybody that it's something that you recycled. It would just be, you know, something that you've done and you're able to recoup a little bit of cost and make up for the times that we maybe don't make as much money as we should in doing what we do, right?
You know what? Seriously, time is now, you know, where it used to be that, you know, you couldn't use things that you used before, but now it is a good ethically good to use things that are recycled. So I think times are different. I think people are really aware that if you're making an effort to do this kind of recycling, I think it's actually part of sustainable floristry. So thank you for showing us the ideas that can be used over and over again. I think that's fantastic.
And I also think that, you know, for the people at the venue, they're really glad when they don't have to clean up after you afterwards. So if you're taking more things away from there that they don't have to clean up, they're going to be happy with you as well, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So I'm just going to play with this a little bit more and let's see what else.
So what do you
maybe.
think about this too? Like, I can see that the passion vine is going to need water tube. I think the dendrobiums need water tube. But I'm thinking that your monstera and your anthurium could be free stemmed because they're going to hold up for upwards of 8 to 20 hours without water, and it will save on time, I believe.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, even the halo leaf doesn't need the water tube either.
No.
You know, if everything is hydrated beautifully ahead of time, there's only a few things, and you really are going to need to have water in. So
I think that's one of the real perks about tropicals is that they really do hold up really, really well. That they're not starving for water. They're not super thirsty. They kind of hold its own. Especially for event work that lasts a certain amount of time, I think it's really a very easy material to use.
yeah, I agree. And again, it's all in understanding the flower's needs, and the conditioning of the flowers is so, so important. And to know what temperatures they need to be stored at, to know what type of humidity levels they expect and will do well with. That's part of being the professional, and understanding that is part of our job. And the more we can learn by either reading or just talking to our friends. Any of these people that I've talked to at the nurseries here in Hawaii, they were so friendly and so willing to share that knowledge with me, and I'm sure they would be with any of you too, because you know, the more we all know about the product, the more successful we're all going to be, and the more that product is going to be respected out there in the marketplace. And with this, I am just literally just taking another piece of dendrobium garland that we had left over, and since it was here, I thought, you know, why not just add it into this? And if I take that, and I think I just like it going down and laying on the table. So very special. You could add more, you could do less, but the concept is an easy concept that's transferable. And again, what bride or groom would not feel very special sitting here for their meal, for their wedding celebration? So that's it for the chair. We're going to be back in it a little bit with a celebration centerpiece for you.
So, Tim, you moved your location. What's going on?
So even through the magic of video, your audience gets to see this in about an hour segment. It's really taken us all day to set up and film here. So naturally, the sun is moving from one spot to another. So in order to give you the best lighting and best appreciation of the florals we have here, we just turned our view, but not a bad view either, would you say? It's pretty good, isn't it?
I think it's awesome. I really love it.
And I think I'm going to jump in that ocean as soon as I'm done, right?
So I have a question for you. So we've been looking at all the different ways that you can design the Neotropica, the new tropical look. So how does it fit in a wedding, like decoration in an ornate ballroom?
Okay, great question. And that's going to bring us exactly to this next design that we're going to create. So what we want to remember is that as artists, we need to think about those principles of design in order to make things make sense together. So what we're going to do, just like with Tropical Nouveau, how you've used maybe a color harmony to bring together tropical and temperate flowers so that they make sense in the same arrangement, we need to think of ways to make our tropical flowers look good in whatever environment we're placing them into, so that the entire, we'll say, canvas or picture that we have is something that makes sense. So we're going to really, through this, use all tropical flowers, but use other elements to tie those two things together, those tropical rainforest kind of look flowers, and maybe that glitzy ballroom, maybe Northeast New York plaza look as well, so that they really do meld beautifully together and become beautiful compositions.
I love it.
So, yeah, so we're ready to can I start? We got time to start now?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do Hawaii meets New York.
There we go. There we go. So now we're just starting with one of our loamy trays, and we've again put in a base, one layer of Oasis foam, the next layer of Oasis, and we're going to look at the materials we have and think, you know, what do we want to do? So we're just going to start by cutting maybe some foliage just to get some placements in here and some other floral materials, and then really add flowers and add other elements to this to make this a beautiful setting. So if we start with like this Song of India, you know, I love this stuff. I think it is absolutely beautiful. I think that the coloration and the striping on it is fabulous. And We're going to pop a little bit of this in here and even cut it into segments. Just because you've used the very top or the crown of it doesn't mean you can't use the rest of it. So we'll cut this into segments and put this in different placements around the design that we have already started. In a centerpiece design like this, we also want to remember some of the basics of design. And one of the first elements we always work with is line. And line for us is that visual path that your eye goes on when looking at a design or when perceiving a design. So many people think, okay, there's obvious lines, there's vertical lines, there's horizontal lines and diagonal lines, but they forget the most basic line that we usually learn about in design is what we call radial line, where everything radiates out of one place. So our job with this as far as line is to make everything seem it spills out almost like a fountain, where everything goes to an imaginary point that's down right inside that container. And when we do that, we achieve really good radial line in design. So the next material, gosh, allocation. Hitomi, I know this is one of your favorites, isn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely is.
I mean, the distinctive look of the veining on that leaf. In some markets, they're known as an African mask, and they just have that very tropical, very, very distinct characteristic to them. And they're again, something that people don't see everywhere. So, when they see it, wow, just a few of them in the design. You don't need many, but just 2 or 3 within that design to address different areas and to be, again, another place that as your eye rides the design, it maybe finds one of them and stops there because they're so magnificent in form and in pattern that we really appreciate a leaf like that in the design. I've always appreciated the Hawaiian flowers and the variety that is available to us off the market, but what I'm really learning to appreciate on my visit here is the Hawaiian and the exotic and tropical foliages. There are so many colors of just green and so many patterns in leaves and so many different forms as far as the shape of the leaves go that it's just endless what we could do. We could almost make an arrangement totally out of foliage and have it be beautiful. Couldn't we, Hitomi?
Absolutely. I think the range of material in that area is just so tremendous, and there's such beautiful patterns, in the leaves themselves. I mean, you see like ribs, and you see like, there's so much pattern in it, and there's such a variation. Beautiful.
And it is one of those things that maybe at first, as somebody is, coming up to a design like this, they just see foliage and they just see green, but the closer you get to it and the more you're drawn into the design, that's when you really get to appreciate all of those different characteristics that we just talked about. So look at even just to start with the foliage we have. There's just a beautiful beginning to a design. So the next thing I think I want to do,
And Tim, you
Yes, ma'am.
actually didn't use a lot of product in that one with Song of India, and that split up in so many different ways. There's not a lot of necessarily stems in there, but yet it's so very full. So I think it really is a very practical and very economical and dynamic at the same time.
It is, and as a good designer, we learn to use that foliage appropriately, so we're not overstuffing to begin with. We need to understand that there's many floral materials here on different levels that we're going to put in, that we don't have to completely cover that foam first and make like a little hedge with foliage and then start putting our flowers in. Go to about maybe 20% of the design that you think as far as fullness it needs to be. Add in flowers, and then again, you can start to tuck in foliages at the end, and it's a much more economical and much more time-efficient way to design if you don't waste all that time stuffing product and stuffing foliage in the beginning part of the design. And we're going to work with so many different materials. Here we have these rattlesnake again, just so unusual, and the color, again, ties so nicely. It almost just gently pulls the yellow out of the Dracaena and out of the Song of India and just adds another motion and line out here. And we're going to repeat that back on this other side as well too. What we want to remember is when we're creating a design, no matter what type of flowers we're using, we always want to make sure that our eye rides through the design and has both a lot of depth and line in the design to make that eye completely travel through the design at all times.
It's also about balance too, right? Visual and physical balance.
Absolutely, and I think the physical balance is the easier one to understand, but we also need to remember, like you mentioned, that visual balance. And what I like to teach my students is, as we're talking about design, is think about your arrangement, and if you put your arrangement on top of a fulcrum, think of that as being like there was a seesaw there, and if you go back and remember your childhood memories of a seesaw on the playground, if you had the chubby kid and the skinny kid hop on the seesaw at the same time, and they're at the same place, it is not going to balance. It's going to, you know, go towards the chubby guy. But if the chubby guy scoots his way towards the center and the skinny guy scoots his way to the very end, then you'll get balance. And that's what we need to do as we're designing. We need to think about how far things are away from the center and what we need to do on the opposite side of that to balance that, whether it's the same material on the opposite side or whether it's a heavy material on the opposite side but maybe closer to the center of the design to achieve that visual balance. I think that often we can actually understand if we've achieved that concept of visual balance in our design by just watching our customers as they look at our design. And if they come up to our design and they're looking at it and they say, oh my gosh, that's beautiful, I think it's just a beautiful design, and their head starts to tilt, that means we have to do something to adjust the visual balance in that design.
And I'm so glad that you're such an incredible designer and such an incredible educator teaching all this, because as you know, and as you know when you're designing this, that we are working with a lot of material that's on the heavy side. Your ginger, your protea, they're heavy materials, so you really do have to have the balance right.
Absolutely, and you know, color, it's about balancing many different elements. It's about balancing lines and balancing color and balancing textures and balancing forms. So if we really start to break down those elements of design and apply the principles to them, I think that's the best way to distinguish between the elements and the principles. The elements are what I would call the things that every design has to have in it that need to be addressed properly. And the principles are the more aesthetic concepts that help us align those elements and make those elements correct in a design. So even that use of yellow, that yellow color being so advancing, by distributing that evenly on 3 different sides of this design, it allows our eye to ride around it in a very rhythmic area and not have too much yellow in one area that draws all your attention and becomes visually too weighty or too heavy for the design. Hitomi, as we're talking, do you have a favorite tropical flower that you've used or that you like to use?
Oh my gosh, you know, that's really a tough question because there's so many wonderful tropicals that I love. I mean, you know, when I showed you that one Anthurium, the real long drapey one, I mean, there's some Anthuriums that really turns me on. The shapes and the curvatures and all of that. So, and of course the orchids. I mean, orchids are fantastic. There's quite a range of orchids in the tropical line. And so they, and as you can see, like the Anthuriums are some of the best in the world, I think. Don't you agree with that one, Tim? I mean, seriously, before I actually, you know, got to work with the Hawaiian Anthurium, before that, you know, they were kind of just small and short and wimpy and not enough flowers that bloom to the end. Look at the quality of these. Fantastic, right?
These are just gorgeous, and I don't know if we showed it in the video earlier. I should have been paying closer attention, but I got the opportunity to visit with Eric Tanoy at his nursery, at Greenpoint Nursery, and they are growing some incredible cymbidiums. And this one has a little bit less of that burgundy freckling to it, and more of that clear yellow that becomes that really advancing color, and just grabs your eye so beautifully. So
and the length of those Anthuriums are what's just absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
For especially for event work, for centerpiece like this.
Just beautiful.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, and as a designer, I mean, I know Hitomi, doesn't it just make you more excited to do what you do when you can get product that's so beautiful and so interesting like this? It makes our job never work. It makes it like play all day long, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Unless you had to do 30 of the same thing, right?
But you know what? I mean, the pattern that you're kind of going with, you know, the placements, it just makes it pretty easy for your assistant or your, you know, designer that's duplicating. I think this is a good recipe. I can see that this could be a good one for other designers to be able to replicate. I think that's important because sometimes when there's a lot of insertions, it becomes really confusing. But the way you explain it, the way you explain the placement and the balance, it makes it easier to understand how this is done. Nice job.
Yeah.
It looks great.
And I do think that's one of the things that, I think that everybody these days who picks up a flower calls himself a designer, and I think there's a definite difference between a floral designer and a floral arranger. An arranger to me is more of an apprentice, somebody who can copy looks and can duplicate something to an extent maybe, but a designer is the one who really can think and really conceptualize where flowers should go, and not only like physically and visually where they need to be, but also like budgetary wise, like what flowers we can use to make this work to still fit in the profit margin or within the budget of the customer.
Exactly. That's the part that's hardest for a lot of people, to fit the budget and to actually maximize. It's kind of economy of means to try to get the most out of whatever quantity of flowers that you have. I think that's really a very important concept that is sort of the job of a designer to come up with, to figure out the aesthetics of it, but also the budgetary part, as you say.
Yeah, and I do pay attention to that always. My background is actually in accounting, so that's the world I came from before I really found flowers and fell in love with the flower world. But I do think, again, you as a designer, we owe that to both our employers and our clients to be able to maximize the look and the value that we can within a design by really understanding what the costs are and what we can give that customer for those costs, and still make a profit for the shops that we work with. This is a nice size centerpiece, and we're gonna see what we're gonna do with this later, but for right now, I'm liking what's going on. And let me see from the front, see how we're doing. I might not have to finish the whole back because we got some things to do. I think I need to address a little something right in here. And after that, we'll be able to move on to our next step. Okay, these green tulip Anthurium, Hitomi, what do you think of them? Aren't they gorgeous?
They are fabulous. Look at the shape of it.
Oh, they're just beautiful, and I love them both front angled, and even just from the back. It almost looks like, the back of a different alien flower that you would see there, so just beautiful.
Don't you think this is so far away from what we always thought tropicals were, the red anthuriums and orange heliconias? I mean, that's kind of what the tropical division of tropical for so many people are that, and look at the color range here. Fantastic.
Yeah, and again, so unexpected, but that little bit of pink just adds a punch of color here, and this yellow, but the greens underneath there, I think that's really what makes this so exciting. That bright lime green undertone to everything really makes these colors pop, and in a ballroom, especially with the right lighting, it's going to be a gorgeous design. So we're going to stop for now, and we're going to put this on top of the stand that we have, and then add a little bit more. So it's a beautiful pedestal. We have that gold and the crystal, and again, this is going to fit in perfectly into that New York ballroom that we talked about. But in looking at this, to me, it's still two different things. It's an arrangement of tropical flowers sitting on top of a gold and crystal pedestal, and it doesn't quite yet make sense together. Maybe in the room it would look okay because there's, this connecting to the room and all, but I still think there's more we could do. So in taking some more of the beautiful garlands that we can have made, and by inserting them into this foam and allowing the flowers now to even come down further, it's starting to connect both elements of the stand and the floral design that we've created. So we're going to take that garland and put that there, and we're going to make one right here. Hitomi, as I'm making this, if you see any holes in this design, you let me know for where I need to be, because I am doing this without a monitor here, but I think we're doing okay so far.
I think so.
Beautiful motion.
It's a beautiful, actually, repetition of the crystal, hanging crystals. Like, it really fits that whole look of the crystals.
Absolutely, and I like even just the garlands that we're going to put in this that are literally going to we could even start up high and have them just cascade over and down and almost reach the table on this side, but it's okay if some of them go to the table on the back and, or on one side and they just kind of lay on the table. That's okay too. It's all a beautiful part of the design, but I love, again, having the line of these come up and into the design and cascade down. And I'm going to take a look from this side.
It
we're
looks
getting there
pretty
now,
darn good, Tim.
Yeah. So, beautiful, beautiful flowers. And look how quickly these can be inserted on site. I wouldn't do these ahead of time, but once you get on site and you put these in, they're gonna be fabulous. So I still want to do more to address how we connect this whole thing and how we make the whole thing make sense together. So for that, we've taken a couple of these beautiful Monstera leaves and just given them some gold paint, that 24 karat gold from Design Master. Beautiful gold. And if we take and we just cut a little bit off and we take a couple of these leaves and just add them in, not too tight into the design, but just adding in so that they, if we can find a spot here, I better go to this side and find the spot to put that in. Yeah, just up into the design and start to really connect these visually and have the whole thing make sense together. I think that's when we create great design, when we're thinking on all those levels and making sure that the whole thing looks very appropriate for the environment, whether it's the ballroom or the outside setting or whatever environment that is, that this looks beautiful for the environment that we're putting it into. And again, with the stand now, it's all starting to make sense. So now we've had the same design at a certain budget, then upgraded it with the garlands, the beautiful garlands. We've upgraded it again with the beautiful leaves, but we can even maybe take it one step further. And to do that, I created something very simple, but I think very effective. And we've just taken some simple, very textural yarn, very fluffy in texture and very, very welcoming as far as your fingers want to explore it. And we've made garlands by just taking a piece of the yarn and tying it onto the stem of individual dendrobium blossoms. So again, most of the glossy textures that you see here and the harder textures are completely contrasted when we add things like this into the design and allow this to just cascade down and become something it's almost like amaranthus or something very textural, but it is still, because it's not a real material, we're still totally tropical flowers here. But also look at the color tie and how this little bit of yellow gold out here really ties in nicely to the base, and now we have unity again in this design. So I'm just going to add a couple more garlands on, and Hitomi, if you could speak about what you see in the meantime, that'll give me time to get this job done here.
Absolutely. No, I mean, these are all extra add-ons, and I mean, this is what's all possible with tropicals, to use it in so many different ways. And you know, again, as Tim had mentioned, it's all about putting it out there on social media, post it. Just, be active in showing what is absolutely possible. Because I think that's kind of how these potential Neotropica kind of looks could kind of thrive and become popular. Because look at that, there's nothing that is stiff and hard and too modern about this. I think it really is very much befitting the stand, the candelabra kind of a look that he has there, and it has a very, very much high-end New York kind of look to it. It has that bit of that glitzy kind of a high-end look. It looks fantastic, and this is just dripping with just beautiful, beautiful tropical flowers.
So Hitomi, it is actually with your help and your influence on this entire market that's introduced Neotropica again, that made me think on this level about what to do differently and how we could create not just a neotropical look, but maybe our own signature neotropical look that can become something that we can market to our customers.
Yes.
What I think the power that we underestimate in our own lives is the fact that many big companies have huge advertising budgets, that they can put money into advertising and social media campaigns and things like that in order to get their brand known. I think every small business like my own has the power to use the talent that's in their hands, the information that's in their head, and beautiful flowers like all the flowers we have available from these Hawaiian islands to create something that has what I call the where'd you get that look?
Yeah.
I know if I didn't do this today and I walked into a place and I saw this on the table, I'd be like, oh my gosh, we didn't do that at my shop. Where'd that come from? That's pretty fun. That's pretty cool. And I'd be very curious, the nosy part of me would want to know who made that. I think it's beautiful. Well, our customers see the same thing. If anybody walked into a ballroom and saw these on the tables for the reception, People are not only going to talk about how beautiful that bride was and how, you know, it made them cry at the wedding, but oh my God, the flowers might even upstage the bride at that point. You know, where'd they come from? Who did those flowers? What an unusual combination. I've never seen anything like that.
Exactly.
And that's the power we have to brand ourselves and make ourselves the superstars in our markets, and to showcase flowers in a way that people have never seen them before, so that now not only do we get the privilege of working with beautiful tropical flowers, but our customers are going to start asking for them again, and then we can have them at our availability all the time and make our work just stunning. And again, the brand that we want it to be.
Absolutely.
So I think that's it for now. Hitomi, any other questions?
Well, let's just wait and see what we get with the Q&A, because that will follow this program, so that'll be fun. We can answer a lot of questions.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
So Hitomi, Colin, thank you so much. Eric, thank you for inviting me here for this. This has been my pleasure, and I can't wait to see what discussions come up in the Q&A.
Yeah, that's going to be fun. Let's do it.
All right, from Hawaii, aloha.
Yeah.
Tulip anthuriums? This is a semi-tulip. Different from many of them is some of them have a very small.
Hey, Tim.
Aloha, Hitomi. How are you today?
Aloha. Yes. Okay. So,
Wow.
Josh.
How did that go out there at Waikoloa, Tim? That must have been quite the challenge with all the wind and beautiful sunshine you were in when you were out designing that beautiful arrangements that you were making.
You know, I loved every minute of it. The wind was a little bit of a challenge, but the sun was beautiful. The ocean behind was just fabulous, and just being in that setting was very inspiring. So perfect place to use beautiful tropical flowers.
Tim, what was your really final takeaway? What are some of the things that you found about tropicals that you didn't know about before?
Well, tell me, when we first talked about this project and you challenged me with the neotropical, the new way to use tropicals, what went through my head was exactly what you started to talk about in your presentation, that the initial thought that most people have of tropicals, and even myself as a designer, that initial concept that comes to mind is the hard lines and those fiery colors, the red and the orange. And there is so much more. And I've known that for years because I've been fortunate enough to be able to work with some product. But getting to go to Hawaii and to visit with some of the farmers and to see the thousands of varieties that they take such good care of, and the color palette and the textures that I really didn't associate myself with tropical flowers was a really good learning opportunity for me as a designer. It really opened my eyes and makes me think of tropicals in a whole new way right now.
That's wonderful. I'm so glad that you had that experience, because I think that's what Nursery Tour does.
Yeah.
Is when you see the way it's grown and the love and passion that goes into it from all these farmers that work so hard. I mean, I saw you there at the packing area and packing that box. I thought that was really cool. That was cool to see. You were right there with them.
You know, I was able to do something at every level, like cleaning and packing and harvesting. I mean, all the growers were so welcoming and really wanted me to understand what goes on behind the scenes, because it gives me new respect for the product. It really does. And I hope every designer out there can get to go to Hawaii someday and visit the farms, because it's a fabulous opportunity.
Excellent.
I was disappointed to have missed you coming to my nursery, because I would have loved to train you on how to eradicate weeds and have you pull weeds from me. It would have been wonderful.
I'm pretty good at that.
I bet. One thing that came up in the questions, which also dovetails back to what was discussed with Hitomi, is as with all plants and flowers, everything old is new again. Do you think that with the modern bride, that neotropical design and for all tropicals will be something that comes back into fashion, or has it already come back into fashion?
Should I answer first?
Please.
You can, yeah, and then I'll follow up with mine. Yeah.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I do think that, like any trend, when consumers experience a lot of one thing, they go into overload or they overdose on it and they want something different. And I think what we've seen is this overuse of hydrangea and roses and those prettier quote unquote flowers for so many years in very tight bouquets with not much design to them, that I think consumers now have seen so much of that, they want something different. And it's going to be both in the types of botanicals that we choose and in design style. So I believe that the real good floral designers are sitting in a real good place right now as we're moving forward, because there's a lot of people that work with flowers out there that are not really good floral designers, that don't have all those concepts of the elements and principles of design locked in their minds to produce these beautiful things and to create something with beautiful lines and a very good use of space and contrast with textures and colors. So I think that what's old again is new again is true. I don't think the old is going to come back, but the old is going to come back in a different way. And it's going to be used very beautifully and is going to be something very sought after by the consumers.
I totally agree with that. And my little input to that is that I think over the last, I'm going to say 5 years, or maybe even more, we have been working really hard to get the tropical nouveau look, the mixture of temperates and tropicals. And so we've got the tropicals in their hands and they're starting to feel comfortable with it. It's just that they just have to be brave to go to the next step, but they already have that in their hands. So now they're able to explore further and be a little bit more adventurous. I think that was a key, that we needed the tropical nouveau to connect them, to get the material in their hands and feel comfortable before they can start to explore further on their own. And so I think we've done a great job to kind of introduce that nouveau mix, because I think that people start to realize how beautiful tropicals are in contrast with the temperates, and now they're ready to try all tropicals. That's kind of what I think.
Yeah, and I do think there's been this unfair, I don't know if it's a rule or a guideline that was always around in floral design, like don't mix tropical flowers with other flowers. But we mix flowers from all other parts of the world, all different seasons, all the time anyway. So there's almost like this discrimination against tropical flowers for that reason. But I think
it was for a while. Yeah, it was for a while.
It's getting much better, much better.
Oh my gosh. But the thing is, the new young generation of designers they're adventurous. They like the challenge of trying something. They love breaking rules. They love to say, hey, you can do this. And they're doing it. And so the next step is, hey, it's kind of like try the Ravenella. Give them that great giant Ravenella and see what they'll do. I mean, I think they're getting ready for that challenge because they've had their hands on their tropicals in combination with the temperates. I think that was the best decision we made, with the Hawaiian growers and talking to them and say, hey, what do you think of this? Let's start with the Hawaiian weddings, what's going on in Hawaii. Let's turn these brides that are coming in and just wanted the hydrangeas and roses to introduce the tropicals in their mix so that it does have a sense of place. And that took off because that's happening everywhere now. And the next step is, hey, why not try all tropicals? They haven't done that before. They're ready for something new. I
agree. And I do think we're very fortunate in this day and age because transportation has changed so much about what we do. And I think part of the hesitation on tropicals before was the time to ship them from that normal shipping chain from like, a grower to maybe an importer to a wholesaler to the retailer. And now a lot of retailers can buy direct and chopping those days off of that supply chain cycle makes a big difference and allows us to give extended value to our customers for premium flowers, like many of the flowers that come from the Hawaiian Islands.
Absolutely. And social media has helped because we're able to show them what's possible, direct to the consumers and brides. So that makes a huge difference. And that coupled with the florists being able to ship direct also, because so often before we relied on the wholesalers to carry certain things. If they don't carry it, we didn't have it. But now we are able to source it direct, which is a huge, huge advantage for us with tropicals now.
Yeah, and I do feel that as a floral designer, myself and all my other fellow designers, we have a responsibility to educate the consumers too, because if we just put out pretty pictures all the time and we don't tag them with names of certain flowers and allow customers to see what these are, and if we do that, people will come in asking for them. They will, but they don't. If they don't know, they're not going to be able to do that. So it just takes a couple more minutes. I think, you know, all of us that are trying to get a hold of that digital world and social media just need to be conscious of what the purpose is for us and how we can benefit from this in our businesses, and by educating our customers through it at the same time that we're promoting our own brand is a great duo of things to do together.
Yeah. So Josh, that was a long answer to a short question.
Maybe one more question. We're getting tight on time, and we really appreciate you guys being out here. I know you're in Philly. One thing that a technique that you use that blew a lot of minds out here was painting the monstera leaf gold. Do you use a lot of different paints and different accoutrement like that with your design work, Tim and Hitomi, or do you see that as going direction? It's really interesting to me that you use paints on plants and whatnot.
Hitomi, you go first on this one, then I'll go.
Okay. So yes, there's a definite trend, and people really enjoy that enhancement. Especially, I mean, I guess in the case of the design that Tim created, it made sense to connect to that environment, to that the stand, to add that gold that really made it connect and fit the suitability of that environment. But what I'm coming from, because my latest concern are a lot of environmental things. And so I'm looking at, you know, the two sides of it. And I like to be able to present the two sides of it, that there's this, but then there's this. So especially on islands like the Big Island and all the islands of Hawaii, when the ocean's right there, and when you know that anything that's harmful that you're using that may be a contaminant to the design goes right into the ocean. That's where it goes. I have to think about it. And that's one of the things that I'm addressing heavily, because I have a lot of young people that are coming to learn and that are asking me about that. So I think we're in a little bit of a transition, and I see some people pulling back from spray painting because of those kind of things. So I think we're in that sort of a decision-making time that hinges on how we feel about it and how we want to deal with sustainable floristry as a whole. So that's kind of where I stand on it. I like to be able to teach both sides and the advantages and disadvantages when it comes to environmental issues.
Yeah, Hitomi, I agree with you as well too. And I very rarely will pick up any paint and paint anything. It maybe happens just a couple times a year, but in certain situations, it makes sense. So I think anything like that in moderation or in very careful decision making is acceptable. But yeah, I am not a big fan of painting everything. I'm not just not into that.
But you know what, Tim? I think it has a lot to do with the bride. If the bride has seen that picture or seen a picture of painted leaf and they want it, it's all about. It's really all about satisfying your customer.
Yeah, we've had quite a few brides that was the most important thing in their wedding, whether it was all gold accents, all silver accents. What we suggested after that didn't matter, but they came in with that preconception. And sometimes in that room, or like you said, with the appliance or the stand that you have, you need to somehow unify the entire composition, and that is the way to do it.
Yeah, I agree.
I do too. Well, that's it for our Q&A section from our side. Are there anything else that you guys would like to relay? Tim, maybe one last word before we wrap it up for the day?
You know, before we go, I just have to say thank you to the people that took such good care of me when I was on the island of Hawaii. It was Eric, Judy, Russell, our photographer, Gordon, Allison, and just all the growers that welcomed me to their farm and took the time to explain to me what went on behind the scenes. I could not have felt more welcome, and the culture of Hawaii is just beautiful, and those flowers are second to none. So I'm looking forward to using more and more in my business.
That's awesome.
Hitomi, would you like the last word?
I'm just so pleased that we had the opportunity to invite Tim. And as you can see, the skill level of his education, it's amazing, isn't it? There was so much that he shared, so much that we were able to glean, and he explains everything so, so well. So I am so pleased that we got an opportunity to do this. And I'm so pleased for you, Tim, that you got a chance to go to the Big Island and see everything, because that makes all the difference in the world. It's kind of a little bit like, you know, the astronauts, when they see the Earth from out there, that it changes everything. And I think that's what it is about coming to Hawaii, to see the material actually grown and meet the growers. That just makes all the difference in the world, how we feel about it.
Absolutely. That's our universe, right?
Yeah, it is. It truly is.